and I will admit all.
So just so all the panelists know, we've worked really hard to get people to this event. And just because of Zoom and because of the logistics of life these days, there's many less people coming to these events. So we did a promotion on WOUB and we sent it out and went through all different resources.
I get it. There's Zoom fatigue. Everybody.
I was just going to say Zoom.
Yeah, I presented at Marietta College today on microaggressions in higher ed, and the audience was really small, and it's okay. It's
okay. There's a lot of things to do. There are a lot of things to do.
Okay, hello folks, and welcome.
Ken, this is Ken Bowalder, everyone.
Oh, hey, Ken.
Hey, we've let the audience in. Lorraine, go.
Everybody's in.
The audience is in.
I'll just do a quick intro here. Welcome to the discussion of the film No Time to Waste. This is the fourth film in the virtual Spring Sustainability Series presented by the Athena Cinema, Southeastern Ohio's premier art house theater. We'll discuss the film for the next about hour and a half, and we ask that you keep your mic muted, but turn on your camera. We love to see our participants, and use the chat feature for questions for our panelists and thoughts about the film. And check out the athenacinema.com for great new virtual films until our opening to check out. And I'll turn it over to our hosts of the series, Lorraine Wachna and Lorraine McCosker.
So good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our 8th year of sustainability film screenings, our first year of virtual, and hopefully our last year of virtual. We're quite happy with the virtual. We're happy for anything. We are sponsored by a few entities at Ohio University, the Athena Cinema, the University Libraries at Ohio University, Environmental Studies, the Office of Sustainability, the Ohio Honors Program, the Ohio University Climate Ambassadors, the Center for Campus Engagement, Cutler Scholars, and the Honors Tutorial College. So we'd like to thank you very much for joining us, and we particularly would like to thank our panelists this evening, and I will give an introduction. We will be having our film, the following film next week. We usually skip 2 weeks, but because of a conflict at the Athena, we'll be showing it next week. And the film is Rebuilding Paradise. And that would be the town in California that was burned about 2 years ago by the campfire. Then we'll have a 2-week break, and we will be showing a really fun film called Motherload, which is about parents breaking the rules and bicycling and taking over the roads. So that should be fun. Yeah, and we just would like to remind you that through our series, we aim to bring together students, faculty, and the regional community. So I think one of our strengths is that we try to connect people in that sphere. So are there any comments or questions? So I'd like to just welcome you for the film, No Time to Waste. And I'd like to introduce our panelists. Maybe our panelists could wave or say hello when I introduce them. Kaya McKinney is a third-year undergraduate student, double majoring in environmental studies and Spanish, with a focus in urban crisis and gentrification and green infrastructure systems. Kaya is passionate about the environment and minority issues and serves as a peer mentor at OU for minority female students in STEM. She's currently completing an independent research study on processes of race and gentrification at the neighborhood level in Cincinnati, Ohio. Janice Ivory is a former resident of Renville, Ohio, graduating from Corning High School in 1959, and then she moved to Columbus. Renville is a former coal town, 25 minutes from Athens, that is considered to be integrated prior to many civil rights laws. So Janice grew up there, and she's involved with the Renville Historic Preservation Society, which is doing their best to preserve that community for historical purposes. Janice was employed by the state of Ohio, where she spent many years in Ohio Air Quality at the Ohio Air Quality Development Authority. And I'm sure if you'd like to ask more about Renville, she'd be happy to share. Winsome Shunu, okay, is the director of the Multicultural Center at Ohio University. Her areas of research are race, educational policy, politics, and popular culture. Her work has appeared in edited collections such as Campus Uprisings, Understanding Injustice and the Resistant Movement on Culture on College Campuses, Documenting the Black Experience, essays on African American history, culture, and identity in nonfiction films, and Before Obama, a reappraisal of Black Reconstruction era politicians, as well as the journals International Journal of Qualitative Methods, Present Tense, a Journal of Rhetoric in Society, Cultural Studies, Critical Methodologies, among others. She served as a guest speaker editor for the journal Fashion, Style, and Popular Culture Journal. Additionally, she is the co-editor of Historizing Fear, Ignorance, Vilification, and Othering, published by the University Press of Colorado. And Ken Bowald is originally from Cincinnati, but has lived and worked around the Great Lakes and upstate New York. He is an Ohio University graduate in recreation studies, outdoor education. Ken has been a certified interpretive trainer through the National Association for Interpretation for over 20 years and trained several hundred interpretive guides. He currently works in the Patton College of Education as an academic advisor and interim director of student affairs. He and his family live in Athens, and Ken is active in tourism and interpretation initiatives throughout Southeast Ohio. And I believe he's still teaching that class where you can actually be certified. So if you're interested in that, you can talk to Ken about it. So we always like to start off the discussion with having people reflect and think about and talk about the film. So we'll just open that up.
I mean, I can go. So as I shared earlier with members of the panel, I knew nothing about Bette, and I was really excited to, one, I'd like to thank the library for this, the library, thank the Athena and the library for the series and inviting me to be a part of this discussion, which I think is crucial. I knew nothing about Bette until I watched this film. And it wasn't actually until I was invited to give a presentation to our recreation department that I did research on how people of color utilize our national parks. And I began to learn about a lot of that disparity. So I was excited when I saw that. But fundamentally, what struck me about this film, and that we will get into later on, is what Chimamanda Adichie talks about, which is the power of story and storytelling, and how it's detrimental when we have a single story. And so if we look at what Bette has done, right, it's about that in our history, And I say our history. I was born and raised in Jamaica. I came to the United States. I became a naturalized citizen in 2017. And so oftentimes when I refer to anything in the United States as our, people will be like, you have an accent, da da da. And it's kind of like my student Kevin, who's third generation Korean, and people would ask him to say something in his native language, and he said, I don't know what you mean. I only speak English. I'm from Chicago. Right? So it's kind of the same thing. It's, you have an accent. Well, that's what makes our country so unique and eclectic, right? That I am a naturalized citizen and I can refer to this as our country, although I have an accent. And that's one of the things I never thought about in our country, is how we utilize spaces in terms of parks. And that's when I learned about all of that. And so for me, I was really, I'm completely enamored with Bette and her story. But for me, also as a qualitative researcher, the power of storytelling is also another piece that resonated with me. And I let somebody else chip in now.
Thank you.
So I just like to sort of just jump on what Winsome said about storytelling. When I teach interpretation, that's the heart of what interpreters are, storytellers. Many for years, museums and sites have thought about, you put up signs with dates, and in the movie, it even talks about a lot of our history and our interpretive efforts have circled around battlefields and wars and dates. And now to go back and look at, I mean, I love that the national parks, they're often thought of as Yellowstone and Yosemite, but you look at Rosie the Riveter and the Working People's Museum that she represents. And to me, the national parks have done a wonderful job of storytelling and bringing out even controversial issues. I mean, things like, I know years ago there was controversy about the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the display the National Park Service put on, or in Jamestown opening, restoring former slave quarters and telling that painful story that is beyond what Jamestown, what most people want to go on vacation and see, be enlightened. But to really be enlightened, you've got to dig deeper and tell the whole story. And that's what I loved about what Bette brings to this. And in interpretive storytelling, I've been very fortunate. I mean, when you see somebody who's a natural storyteller and a natural interpreter, and they're doing the things that we talk about as the best of interpretation just by sharing their story. And I've had the great fortune of working with Janice and Renville and seeing, when people tell their stories and their heart is there, your audience is, that's what that grabs people, that makes people connected to the place. And that's what our parks can do, whether it's Yellowstone or Yosemite, or it's, a former factory site somewhere, that tells a working people's story. It's the intangible pieces that make that connection in a story, and makes people connected. In my class, I tell a story. There's a story, a fable about a young boy who travels outside of his town to a cave. And this voice comes out of the cave and tells him stories every night. And after months and months, he finally asks the whatever's telling the stories to come out. And the voice says, "You would be afraid of me if you saw me." And when it comes out, it's this giant dragon that's been telling him stories, this big, fearsome, scary looking creature. And the boy's not afraid. And the dragon says, "Well, why? Everyone's always been afraid of him." And he says, "When you know someone's story, you can't be afraid of them. You can't hate them." And so that, in a nutshell, that kind of tells a story, makes connections. So when you learn, the story of Renville, you get a feeling of the place and being there and touching and just absorbing the smells and the atmosphere and the sights and the sounds and everything, and the stories of the people. You become attached to the place. And that's the best of what our, not only national parks, but parks in general. And hopefully we, this can kind of bring that attention. But even beyond that, telling a human story that people can connect with someone as honest and as forthright and giving and generous as people like Bette and Janice and the folks that are telling their stories and making it important. So
I think it's wonderful that people have an opportunity to understand that you can learn your history, you can share your history, and you can do it through a story, because most people don't make the connection of storytelling and history. And if you tell them we're going to go to a national park and do history, you're going to have nobody show up. But if you tell them we're going to go to the national park and do stories, they're all willing to do that sort of thing. So I think for her to be doing something like this on a national level is it's just wonderful to me. I think storytelling is very important, especially when you get to a place like she did, where she knew the story, but she couldn't find herself in it, and she knew she should be a part of it. To then just have the opportunity to insert herself within that story where she should be. And I think it's something that we all have to do. And when I say all, I don't mean just people of color. Women have been as pushed to the side as much as people of color have. We all have a story to tell. I often get, when talking to my grandkids, I have to remind them that when there is a controversy and it's settled, it's the winner that writes the history. So you have to be very careful to make sure that both sides of the story gets told, whether you are the winner or the loser. You have to get your story out there. And I thought it was really great. My granddaughter and I had a lot of fun this afternoon going over that movie, just the two of us.
That's wonderful.
For me, I really enjoyed the film because I have a passion for history personally, and I think it was just amazing to see in one individual that she had lived through almost an entire century of American history and was able to still speak about the things that she had witnessed, either by coincidence with the Bay explosion where she had taken in those Navy soldiers for the day, or just with the types of things that she had to deal with as a Black woman in this country. I just was amazed that she was able to not only speak about her experiences, but in a way in which people can listen to her and learn from her, because I think that's lacking now in today's society where people don't listen as much. And I think when she speaks, you just can't help but listen to her, which is really important in order to get people to learn from what she has experienced living, for the past 99 years.
It is quite remarkable. So my next question is, the story of Betty Reed Soskin follows her life as an articulate African-American woman who became a national park ranger at 85. Soskin is the granddaughter of a slave who was freed by Abraham Lincoln. As many people of color in America, Betty has lived a life filled with sometimes painful and deeply troubling experiences, yet she remains a defiant voice of hope. And we also saw in the film how she struggled with, she fought against her attacker who came into her apartment. So my question is, can you discuss Betty Reed Soskin as a person?
I envy her that at her age, she is still capable of doing as much as she is. And I'm, one of the other things that, and it's something that I make sure I do it with at least one person every day. It's a good day if it's a day that you learn something. And you have to make an effort to make sure that you learn something every day. And I think she does it. I think she puts the learning out there for the world. And I just admire so much that she's able to do that. And I just think she's really great. I hope by the time I reach that age, I can be half as I can do half as what she's doing.
I agree with Janice. I envy her as well. One, I hope I live to be her age. I probably will be in some country, probably on the Mediterranean somewhere, relaxing. But nevertheless, will still be doing social justice work that I'm passionate about. But it's the fact that she's able to do what she's doing and is making the kind of impact that she is. This is not something we see every day in our society. So it's something to be applauded.
I think there's something also to be said for her way. And honestly, you know, I've been to many national park programs, and usually they're stellar. I mean, that kind of passion for place, but that she can tell a controversial, painful story with so much love and so little animosity that the audience, even though you realize that that your ancestors may have played a part in the wrong side of this, or the painful side, that she doesn't approach it with any animosity. And you can tell just by her interaction with the audience that there's a love there, that she just wants to share, that she's not creating pain. She's not looking for some sort of revenge, and it's just telling a story and letting people absorb it and be part of it. And I just thought that was, you know, phenomenal, that she's so just that welcoming demeanor in the stories that she told was it was wonderful. It was very heartfelt and wonderful.
Similar to what you just spoke about, Mr. Bold, I think it's interesting that she also has the conviction to know that she is going to instill change in people, which I think is something very difficult for me as a student and as a young person as well, that she realizes that she doesn't have a lot of time left to speak her truth and her stories that she has experienced, but she can understand that by not holding on to that hatred or to all of the difficult things that a person of color has to deal with by just living in this country, that she's not going to hold on to that and then perpetuate that into what she is going to tell other people. She is just going to speak about her own life and the things that she's witnessed, while also knowing that the way in which she does it is going to change people's perception of our society, which is just amazing, because I think a lot of people don't necessarily know how their actions will play out, but she is able to just reach so many people in such a calm way that she can see how that will affect how they view national parks around the entire country.
And I could also see, Ken, how some people will potentially challenge that notion, right? So this notion that people of color somehow always have to present ourselves in a way that makes white people feel comfortable, although it's not our responsibility, and we are in a crisis in terms of race relations in this country because of white people and white supremacy, and not because of anything that we have done. And that she does it in such a way, though, that even someone such as myself, who is passionate about making sure that people understand why it's important to have hard conversations, why it's important that people, she has this way of making people still saying those hard truths, but making people still walk away feeling like, I really should reflect on this. And that's a skill.
Not only
and that's the piece that I admire.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but there is no anger in her. And usually what happens when you have someone who's trying to talk about something like that, it's kind of hard not to show the anger, but she doesn't have any. There is none there. And so it doesn't come across as being threatening at all when she's talking about it. I know at one point there was they talked about hope, a voice of hope. And I don't think she shows so much a voice of hope as she does show a voice of love. And it just does not matter to her who is out there in that audience. This is the way it is. And this is what I'm telling you. And just there's no anger. There's nothing negative about what she's saying. It's just it's a hug.
I think you can see, I mean, the National Park Service used to have a saying that the audience is sovereign, meaning that the story is important, but your audience is sovereign, that you are trying to give them something to take away, a meaningful, and it may not be happy, it may be disturbing, but it's meaningful, and you approach it in such a way that you want them to benefit. And so you put yourself in a place. So for me, it has to do with like environmental issues. If I'm talking to an audience about, mountaintop removal or fracking or something that I'm very passionate about, when you wear the hat, whether it's figurative or literal, as an interpreter, you try to tell the story and allow people to make up their own conclusions and make their own attachments. And you tell it with love and with the idea that you're trying to raise them up, then and sometimes they may not come to the right conclusions, but you've put it out there in an honest, approachable way with love. I don't think there's, it's a positive experience for everybody. So.
Can I say something?
Oh yeah, please. Hi, Beth.
Okay, hi. Okay, so I was trying to think of a way to say a similar thing to what you just said, Ken. I feel like she's telling her story. She's not necessarily trying to teach Black history or a lesson or anything like that, but by the way that she tells it, she allows the audience to relate it, to those different, subjects or issues or whatever, without, she's not like ramming it down your throat. It's just so natural. It's pretty amazing.
Okay, so following up on Saskin, she says when referring to history that's offered by the National Park Service at the Rosie Riveter Trust site, the history that I lived, it was nowhere in sight, not 1 minute of it. The opportunity to insert African American stories is what the park became to me. And then she also states she is running a federally funded revolution. The revolution is a historical knowledge to put the reality of our country and race relations in context with the present. So who would like to approach that?
I can jump in here. So one of the things I thought about as you were saying that is, so I do trainings around microaggression. And one of the things we talk about is environmental microaggression. And what that means is, if Lorraine says, I'm passionate about women's rights, etc., and Ken says, I am passionate about mountaintop removal, etc., and I walk into Ken's office without knowing anything about either one of these people, what is it about the space that says to me that this person is passionate about X or Y? What is it about the pictures on the wall, etc., that says that? So right away, I'm viewing the environment. So she rolls up into the space and she's saying, there's nothing here that says anything about Black people having made any contribution to any of this stuff, just based on what I'm seeing. And my goal is I'm going to change that. But going back to what Beth said, right? It wasn't, and look, we have activists who operate in many different ways. There are people who come out and they're forceful like a Malcolm X. Then we have an MLK. Then we have Rosa Parks who sat on a bus. We have people who manifest in many different ways, right? And Ken, who will come and talk with you about mountaintop removal in a loving way, so that by the time Ken leaves, it's like, maybe I should really give this some more thought, rather than I'm pissed off at Ken because now we're going to be losing jobs and I came here to curse out this presenter, but now I can't, etc. Right? And so for me, that is how I felt she dealt with that. Was she came into a space and didn't see us. And in her own way, by using her story, she dismantled this environmental microaggression that was present.
Mm.
That's my take on that.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah, I think what is also so important about her narrative too is that she does it in a way, like we've talked about, that is not angry and is very calm and composed, in a way in which will result in people listening to her in a respectful way, so that there is no kind of idea that she is distracting the attention from what is actually present in that display and in that national park. Because I think that is what is so interesting about her skill as a storyteller, to present her experience and her time during World War II without detracting from what history is typically taught. Because I think that is something that I've experienced as a student when people of color try to present their side of it, or how I was on the receiving end of learning things in high school during, American history courses about the history that I was taught. But as a person of color and as a Black person, I had to learn that history at home because my parents were educated enough to do that for me. And so I really like how she was able to bring in the Black experience, because if she didn't do that, no one would know that if they went to that national park and she wasn't sitting there as a presenter. So I really enjoyed that, because a lot of the times, even today, students are not taught a perspective other than whoever wrote that textbook. And if that person that wrote that textbook is biased, then you're only going to hear one side of that narrative.
I also wonder if it also opens the doors to people's mind to think there are a lot of stories that are not being told, and this is an example of one that was overlooked. Could there be, and there certainly was, Asian American stories in that time period and what was happening, especially on the West Coast, but certainly across the country. What about children's stories, or there's different demographics that all play into this, and it's not, history is not only about dates and number of people killed, it's about people's lives day to day, even far from the battlefield, and how things affect through time, regardless of what's happening, sometimes in times of war, and sometimes because of what's happening in war. But people come away saying, wow, I never thought about that perspective. What other perspectives am I missing here? So it opens a great doorway to a lot more interpretation and personal connections, I think.
What I picked up from it was that she didn't try to change the thought or the narrative of what was already there, but rather took her own story and inserted it into what was already there. So I'm not changing anything. I'm just adding to it, just letting you know there was more here than what you already know about. And that is a lot less threatening than having someone come in and say, no, that's all wrong, we need to rewrite it. It's like, no, we're not going to rewrite it. We're just going to look at how we need to add a little bit to it.
Other comments? I think there was a comment in the chat here. This is from Megan. And she says, yes, she combats the erasure. I'm thinking you mean that she combats the lack of presence of that information. Yeah. You're welcome to talk too. You can unmute and talk. So just to get it little into, I think it's really important. Betty was born in 1921. I know my mother, who's been dead many years, was born in 1927. So that is an incredible, that is, yeah, a whole century. And if we think of all the changes that have gone on, and especially in terms of oppression and race relations, it's quite remarkable. But she, her father fled Louisiana. She was born in Louisiana, and he fled to avoid being lynched because he spoke out against a white person. And then her grandmother, of course, was a slave who had been freed. And then she talked about some of her challenges and the fact that when she was a young woman, just getting this clerk job was so incredible because of the racial segregation and lack of opportunity for many people of color. Does anyone want to address that? I mean, just the personal stories. And what's so important right now is that those stories are coming out, and we're much more informed, I think, as a society, or at least we're evolving just an inch, you know, just a tiny bit towards more understanding. And certainly I'm sorry, Janice, go ahead.
When I graduated from high school, I went to work for Nationwide Insurance. And my grandfather when my grandfather passed away in the mid-70s. And at the time, my last conversation, he before he got so into dementia that he was not there anymore. My last conversation with him was, he told me, girl, you need to stop telling that lie. And the lie that he thought that I was telling was that I was working in an insurance company and sitting at a desk, because he did not believe that anybody was going to let a Black girl do that. And it's so I was so able to identify with what she was saying when she said that, because I'd been there.
Wow.
We look at African American history, right? We look at movies like The Help. We were always in positions like maids, janitors, cleaners, etc., right? So
Right.
The fact that she got a job as a clerk, or you at Nationwide, it's like, what?
Right.
And your dad probably thought you were trying to make him feel good.
And that's what I said, you know, you have to stop telling that lie.
So yeah, and I see Ada Adams is on. I don't mean to call her out or anything, but she is a stalwart of African American history in this area, particularly like in our area. So I see she took herself off mute. Maybe she's about to say something.
Hello, everyone. I came on late and I wanted to get the flavor of the conversation, and I was enjoying what everybody had to say. So thanks, Winsome, for calling me out.
Winsome had to call you out. Yeah.
But I can relate to what Janice and Winsome just confirmed, is that even back in the 60s, in the 50s and 60s, when I was going to high school, we had teachers who would say to us, no, you don't need to take college prep. All you're going to be is a maid or clean somebody's house or cook for someone. And you had to fight to be able to take the courses that you wanted to take. And then even after before I could graduate from OU, I couldn't do my student teaching in Athens, Ohio, because they didn't allow Blacks to teach at the time in the school system. And so I had to go to Cleveland, Ohio to do my student teaching. But I really like Ms. Shoskin's story. It resonates with so many parts of our American history. And the way she tells her story, like Janice was saying, is that she brings her perspective into the story. And in such a way that no one's embarrassed, but they realize, oh, I never thought about it like that. And I hope that I can live to be 99 and still tell my story. She looks fantastic. Yeah. But this area has a lot of history that Janice, I don't know about you, but or even I feel guilty for a long time about telling my story.
Right. Yeah.
But now I don't, because someone said to me, you need to say it. You need to say it before you die.
Right.
And my husband, Alvin, wrote many times that there's inconsistencies. He was a wordsmithy. Now I am just blunt. So when I meet with groups, I will tell them what I feel about a situation and tell it in a way that I hope give the listener an opportunity to think about what I've said. And one of the things I do now is encourage white people to do your own research on Black history. I and all the other Blacks in this group, we have studied your history for years. We have heard you tell our stories, and we had to bite our tongue many times throughout that process. And so now it's time for us to tell our story, however you want to tell it, and for you to research a story and then talk with us about it. It's not that we don't want to do the research for you, but we've lived it already. And we love to talk about ourselves, just like you like to talk about yourself. So.
Well, I'll put a plug in for this book that I just read. Oh, you can't see it. It is John Meacham, His Truth is Marching On, about John Lewis. And there were many things in here I did not know, but it really talks about the 50s and the 60s in the South and the rise of the civil rights movement and how strategic and how incredible that whole process was and the incredible strength of these people. That's a really important book.
If
Yeah.
I plug a book from our area, Ada, I'm blanking on the name of the book, but it's in our library in the Multicultural Center. The book that the Multicultural Genealogical Society worked on that's related to like the Black First in Southeastern Ohio.
Are you talking about Significant Presence, the Black experience?
Yes, I think.
Well, that's one. The Black experience in Ohio is book myself and Nancy Aiken put together just to show some highlights of Black culture during a certain time period in Athens. And it's called Significant Presence.
Yeah, we have one copy in the Multicultural Center Library if anyone would like to get it, but also if others are interested in the Black presence specifically in our area,
right.
It's a good book to look at.
Yeah, it talks about a lot of Athens people connected to the story. And piggybacking on the civil rights story, my husband covered the civil rights movement during his career. And one of the things we did, we took time out from our jobs to participate in the civil rights movement. And I'd like to share this story with you about resiliency. And it's about Fannie Lou Hamer. It's a person that we walked down a dirt road in Mississippi to get to her house and to have a conversation with her. And she began talking to me and others about her experience. And one of the stories she told us about her ride on the bus going, I forgot now where she was going, but it was, they got stopped in Anniston, Mississippi, I believe. In any event, the location is not that important. The story is important. They were taken off the bus and taken to jail. And she was put in a cell and beaten. She was beaten by a Black man who was forced to beat her. And so she tells how the whole circumstances of that. But that did not deter her. When she found out that she had the right to vote, she defied the Southern ways and decided to become an activist. And because of that, she got beaten almost near to death. But she, like John Lewis, recuperated and became more determined to fight for what was already her right. But she had to fight for it and fight for all the rest of us to understand why it was so important that Black people was just trying to do one thing, vote. And so hearing her story and her resiliency, I think has given me strength to do some of the things I have done in my life, because I was never, and yet most people don't believe this, but I was always behind the scenes type person. But because of thinking about my ancestors and people like Fannie Lou Hamer and the encouragement of many, I now can speak out and speak up. But no, I'm sure John Meacham's book tells a lot of stories like that. But to have that personal relationship with Fannie Lou Hamer has always been wonderful.
And her name again, Miss Adams, is what?
Fannie Lou Hamer. Fanny, Fannie Lou Hamer.
Fannie Lou Hamer. Oh, there we go.
You got it?
Yeah, Lorraine posted it.
Okay, yeah.
And for the students on the chat, Ada's husband graduated from OU from our journalism program and was a lot of firsts in Black journalism. And Adams Hall on the South Green is named after her husband. So this family has a significant presence in Southeastern Ohio, but also on Ohio University's campus.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks, Ada, for jumping in. I know I called you out.
That's okay.
Lorraine and everybody else, forgive me.
No, thank you so much.
We all needed that piece of history.
This is the first time I have an opportunity to meet you, Janice, and I've been emailing maybe your husband, but it's a pleasure meeting you and all the work that you've done out there in Renville.
Thank you. It's my brother.
Is your brother?
Harry.
Harry, yes.
Yeah. It's my baby brother. He hates me to say that. I called him the other day and said something about him and being baby brother. He said, excuse me, I'm 65 years old. Can we drop the baby?
Understand, yes.
Yeah, but thank you. I've been looking forward to meeting you personally.
Thank you.
Should I jump on to the next topic? Okay. So Soskin's ethic is to work and to the fullest each day, because what individuals do does matter. And I think that many of us think that on this panel. Discuss this ethic. Do you agree that each moment is critical when bringing forward critical teachings? And is this what Soskin is teaching us or sharing with us?
I like this question a lot. I'm just putting.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lorraine. I was about to say, I didn't want to be the first to go, but
No, I'm not gonna.
Lorraine, go. Lorraine, go, go, go.
You're so funny. I'm just putting the question in the chat because it's a great question, but it's a hard question. So I want everyone to just look at it.
Okay.
I think the first thoughts that come to me about this question is that I do think each moment is important just because maybe not literally, but while you're waiting to do the work that you want to do, or as a lot of the people on the panel were talking about telling their own story, someone else is already writing their own as well, or contributing to the larger narrative that has been in our society so much. And so I think that that is something that that I really admire about Betty, and how she was able to say how she doesn't have any more time to get things wrong because of her age, but also because there's no time like the present to do the work of racial reconciliation in this country and in the realm of the environment, which I think is something that I strive to do as well, because a lot of the times, especially in the environmental field, they don't have the opportunity to speak their own experiences in things like this. And so I think that that's really important, and I admire her, view about that.
Winsome, I want to ask you, do you feel that when you're teaching, or do we have another teacher here? Well, Winsome, as a person of color, do you feel that each moment is critical when bringing forward your critical teachings?
Absolutely. For me, it's so when I do microaggressions and implicit bias training, I often talk about teachable moments. And one of the things I always impress upon, and I know it's hard, the panelists, everyone in the audience, this is hard. If someone is cursing you out, it's hard not to respond back in a curse them out way. But what I always instill are, like, we're looking for teachable moments because we know better. It's hard. We're people, we're human beings. It's not always going to work. But for me, is every interaction I have, if I'm uptown and I'm eating in a restaurant, I feel like this student is one of my students, or I'm going to speak to their class at some point. So it's always critical for me to make sure I am dealing with everyone I'm dealing with respect, because I don't know when I'm going to see them again. And I feel like I will probably see them again at some point. That's one. Two, since our curriculum across the United States, I'm not blaming any one institution, does not always include a diversity course or diversity conversations. If I am invited to someone's class to talk about microaggression, implicit bias, diversity and inclusion at OU, what the Multicultural Center does, etc., I am going in with the mindset that I may be the only person of color that they've heard from in their 4 years at Ohio University.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's critical that they walk away feeling, oh, she was nice. We know where office is, so if we need anything else, we can go to her. So for me, yes, like it is always critical, but it's because of what I do, who I am, and the kind of country I am hoping that we become as we become a more perfect union. Again, I only became a citizen 3 years ago. So January 27th, every year I get all emotional and all that stuff because that's when I became a citizen. So that's still new to me. So when I say this creating a more perfect union, it's not fib. I'm not just kind of throwing out talking points. It's like I cry every year at that point. And as a matter of fact, this year I wasn't able to celebrate because that was when, talking about a critical moment, that was when the travel ban dropped from the Trump administration, that students couldn't come back. And we had students in Iran, in Iraq, in Sudan, in other places who went home to collect data and couldn't come back because we had a travel ban as they were in the air.
Wow.
And so I was looking forward all these years to getting my citizenship and enjoy this moment and do all these things. And then it finally happened and I was stumped because I'm like, I'm from all over the world. How can I possibly celebrate this moment I have waited for all these years when I have friends who are in the air who are no longer able to get into the country? And so I did absolutely nothing. I was in Columbus. I came back to Athens that night. But then I have two really great friends here, and they called me and said, and I said, I don't want to do anything. I'm just not in the mood. I mean, with the travel ban, I just cannot be celebrating. I feel badly. And they're like, girl, you need to stop. We're going on the New American Shuffle, which was what we did. And so we went to different bars and we had American theaters at every bar. It was kind of like, my computer is going off with some other stuff that I don't know that I'm still trying to figure out. But it was, can you all still hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So it was one of those things where, you know, that's kind of my story of a critical moment. So every January 27th, which is my citizenship anniversary, that's what I remember. The part of the travel ban, but I also remember the other part, that I'm an American citizen and that means something to me. After I've been living here for over 20 years, that means something to me. And it's near and dear to my heart. And so, yes, critical moments are a part of my life as a Black Indian. My father is Indian from India. My mom is Black, but our Indian family came to Jamaica. My great-grandparents came to Jamaica. So my grandparents were born in Jamaica. So was my parents. So I am third-generation Indian. And I was actually raised in, talk about the story. I was actually raised Indian in Jamaica my entire life. Then I came to the United States as an undergrad and I immediately became Black. Then I had to learn what that meant, because I grew up with Black people stereotyping me even Black people from my mom's family, because the majority of the people in Jamaica are Black, and like the United States, where white people make up all the stereotypes for everybody else, they make up all of those things. And so I still straddle these two identities. I go home, I'm Indian, and I'm here, I'm Black. And it's kind of like, right, you know, it's what we have to deal with, right? Those of us who are called to do this kind of stuff, it's what we do. When I first came here, my older sister told me, do not marry an African-American, they have bad credit. So now I am at these things and I'm talking about institutional racism, what all that means. And now it's like, okay, you think you know everything because you have a PhD, because I work with this or I have a friend, the same kind of narrative that we struggle from. But again, I'm saying that to say, we have to understand that it's the larger systemic institutional issues that are informing what we're doing, going back to Betty, right? And then until she came in and she has decided to tell her story in a way that is appealing to people, but also going back to critical and crucial, because she's at that age. And before this, we talked about her saying, I need to do this now. We have had 10 Holocaust survivors that have come to OU that I have brought in personally. And one of the things they all share is, there was one woman, she was 85 when we brought her 4 years ago, Wanda Wolaski from Arizona. And Wanda said it was only in the last 4 years, she's 85 years old, that she started talking about her experience in the Holocaust. And the first time her kids and her grandkids knew about her experience was she was about to speak to a school and she invited them. Stories are powerful and they're meaningful. And we need to understand when people decide to tell their story, it's because they recognize it's a critical moment. And Wanda told her story for the first time at 80 years old to her own children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Because, and so that's what Betty is doing. She recognizes that the time is critical and every moment that I have is critical. Every interaction that I have had is critical in telling the story of the national park and helping us to understand that it is a inclusive, nuanced story. It's just that you've never heard those other pieces. And that's why you don't see us in the parks. I probably went on too long.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. I have a question for clarification. Such a powerful story when some.
Ada, I think Ada is speaking, but I think her.
Oh, can you hear me?
I think she's muted. Ada, you're muted.
No, on my end, I'm not.
We can hear her.
We can hear her.
Okay. Winsome, you're going to lose out on this one. But, well, this is for Winston's question. If she can't hear it, then I'll say something.
Can you hear Winsome? Can you hear?
I don't think she can. I really thought Winston's testimony was very powerful, and there's so many points in there that needs to be unpacked, and I'm not the one to unpack all of them, but what she had to say is very powerful. And when I go out and speak with the group, and I'm sure Betty thinks the same thing, you only have one chance to get it right or the way you want to say it. And that's what Betty said. She said, I only have one chance. You can't go back and change it. I don't have time to go back and change it. So the thing of it is that each person of color has their own perspective on life, depending on their experiences that they have encountered. And so I think Winston gave us a lot of information there to think about and digest. Thank you, Winston.
Thanks, Ada.
Right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I have a question for you then.
Sure. I
Okay.
had to.
Okay. You were talking about your family.
Mhm.
You grew up in India, but you lived in Jamaica. So you said, so are the people in Jamaica referred to as Black? Is that the color or is that the group when you say Black?
It's the color and not the group.
Okay.
So in the islands, for example, I always, one of the things, and I'm glad I'm always, this is like the kind of teacher in me, educator in me is always going back to the theme and the whatever. So one of the things with when they're talking about giving speeches is that people always remember a story. So you could give a 1-hour speech, but they'll remember the story. So I had a friend here, Gail, from Guyana. And Guyana is geographically South America. They're the only English-speaking country in South America. They're geographically South America, but culturally Caribbean. So for those of you who know Dr. Vibert Cambridge, Pat Cambridge, they're from Guyana. And Gail, who is a friend of mine who was here, we were in grad school together, is also from Guyana. Gail is about your complexion, Ada. So in Guyana, as in Jamaica, she would be referred to as brown. So when she came to OU, it's the first time that she was ever referred to as Black. And she always talks about that how strange it was hearing herself being referred to as the Black girl, because in Guyana, she was always the brown girl.
Right.
Janice would be the brown girl.
Can I interrupt you there for
Somebody
a minute?
who's significantly darker skinned would be Black.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And the reason I bring up this because I need our white friends to understand the dynamics of culture.
Yep.
So the thing of it is, here in America, they use the term Black and white with a small b and a small w as a form of writing, but in the Caribbean and other South American countries and Jamaica, they refer to the person's color of their skin. So one of the things that we need to discern is here in America, Black is substituted for African, Black American, African American, and so it doesn't refer to the color of the skin. And so and that's another thing in telling story. You have to know, you have to know the audience. And the reason why I brought it up is because I didn't know if the group here tonight knew the nuances.
No, that's great. I'm glad you did, because that's crucial in understanding that, again, it goes fundamentally back to that race is a social construct. So wherever you are the way that society constructs you. When I was in Kenya, people refer to me as Mzungu, which is a term they use for white.
Because your skin is lighter than theirs.
My skin is lighter, I have curly hair, and I'm from America.
Right.
And so there are all these nuances.
Right. And so one of the things that I've been trying to get educators and others, media to do is, if you're using the term Black and as a substitute, as a noun, it should be a capital B and a capital W. The AP finally concluded that B should be a capital B.
Capital,
But it's a racist thing, but because white is so well known, we don't need to capitalize white. And that's another way of putting us down. That's another way of putting Black people down and raising you up. And so if from now on, if you're doing any papers or anything and you're talking about Americans, most Americans are born, and I'm African descent. My 6th great grandmother came from Africa. So I have African blood, I have European blood, but I have American, born and raised in America. So I'm a Black American. That's what I call myself. Every person of color can call themselves anything they want. But I refer to myself as a Black American. And so one of the things, and I'm so happy that you brought up the topic, Winston, and described your family. But the nuances there, I picked up on, but I don't know if everybody else translated that too, what that means in America. So when you came to America, you were Black, but they weren't talking about the color of your skin, but the culture.
Yep,
Because
it's the cultural piece that's crucial.
we have people like Miss Ivory who could pass as white.
Yep,
But she's
Yep.
Black American.
yep.
Because culturally speaking, they throw us all in one bag.
We also haven't talked about the fact that Betty is really, really like skinned, coming from Louisiana, and what role that actually plays in the way she's received. There's also that piece that the film doesn't interrogate, but that's a whole nother thing. And we only have 15 minutes. So Lorraine and everybody else, again, don't kill me for bringing a big topic up with 15 minutes to go.
Sorry.
No, I think that this is, I mean, of course, we all, I'm really happy with this information and this discussion. I did have a few questions for the individual panelists, if we could maybe jump into them. Janice, would you please discuss your experiences growing up in the town of Renville and your participation in the Renville Historical Society?
I have, I was 10 when my family moved to Renville. We lived on the east side of Columbus up until that point, and it was an all Black community. When my parents separated, my mother gathered up her little biddies and took them home. So we went to Renville. Renville was an interracial community, and it was a great culture shock for me because up until that point, I was not allowed to associate with white people. And suddenly here I am mixed in with them, and I'm supposed to treat them just like they were family. And it didn't take me long. I was only 10, it didn't take me long to change the way I went about it. I thought about that too when we started at the beginning and we're talking about the National Park Services. When we first moved to Renville, the thing that scared me the most was going out in the woods. And there is no way that you can go to Renville and not go out in the woods. And you can go across the street and you out in the woods. But that scared the lights out of me. The other thing about Renville that really scared me is that there was no traffic. It was so quiet. It was just really spooky quiet. Today, if I had easy access to groceries and medical care, I would be living in Renville. It is, for me, that is my safe place. I was there until I graduated from high school. It was a wonderful experience. I wanted my son did like it. I have had relatives there after I lived in Columbus, and there were any number of times that I would come in from work and find a note that says they're gone to Renville. They might come back that night or the next night or a couple of days or whatever, but and he didn't mind that at all. It's hard for me to get him to take his kids to Renville, but then there's nobody down there anymore. And there were people there when he was going down. But Renville, I have, with working with the Renville Preservation Society, I have 3 personal goals. My first goal is to let the world know we were there. And we were given the and once being there and given the opportunity to do things, we could do it. We have the book that you were talking about earlier about the first from Southeast Ohio. We have 5 documented first. We have one first that I'm still trying to document at this point, but I think it's something that we need to let the world know about. My second goal with the association is to give the descendants of Renville a place where they can access their legacy and know the kind of strength that built the foundation that they are. There are so many of them who have gone on to do great things that nobody knows about. One of the grandsons from Renville is now the artist who's in charge of doing all of the maps for the state of Ohio, but nobody knows about his Renville connection, you know? And the two of the kids that grew up in Renville are now high-ranking NASA officials, but they don't have that, you know, that Renville connection. And I want to build that and put it there so that people know that this is where your family originated. My third goal is just to show the world that we are somebody. And that's pretty much what I'm dealing with now. At this point, we're trying to renovate one of the former company houses for the miners' company houses that was in Renville that we would like to use as a sort of a tourist educational center kind of thing for people who come through. And we have a second project that we're working on now where we're trying to identify and preserve the Renville Cemetery. What we have found out at this point, that even though Renville was an interracial community, there are only Black people buried in the cemetery. The white people were buried someplace else. We don't know where that is yet, but we're looking. And we're working with a couple of the students from Ohio State University on the cemetery project. I don't hold things in my memory the way I used to, and I didn't bring it up. Renville Historic Preservation Society has a presence on Facebook. Check us out.
I did put it in the chat. And just for people who don't know, it is a coal town, of course, as most of Southeast Ohio was coal towns, but an integrated coal town that hired people of color to work in the mines. So it's pretty unique in that way.
And I mentioned too that within Perry County, Renville was the only town that Black people were allowed to live for a long time.
Oh. Kaya, we'd like you to discuss your experiences in environmental studies and your research interests, and just as a younger person, how you found this film, if it was inspiring to you as a growing professional.
So my research interest, when I first came to OU, I was really interested in green roofs and how that can be utilized in urban settings. But then as I experienced my first few years at OU, sorry, I don't. Oh, okay, sorry, it was frozen on me for a minute. But I had a really interesting time my first couple years at OU where I never felt like I was fitting into the right places because I'm an honors tutorial college student and there was only one other person of color in my entire cohort of around 80 students. And so in a lot of my classes, I'm typically the only person of color or the only woman of color in my classes. And so as I took more coursework, I integrated racial kind of work into my studies and how green spaces aren't as accessible to populations of color in urban areas. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now, just which was interesting to connect this to the film of how I've learned a lot about national park spaces and how a lot of people of color were not able and still are not able to access those areas in a lot of parts of the country. And just for me personally, I've had to experience things of deciding if I'm going to even go to this park or if I'm going to go into this space with another person of color. Typically, I would not do that. I've only ever gone to places with another white person just out of safety for myself and the situation. So I really liked this film for how Bette was able to kind of bring in her own lens in the environmental realm. And I think, as you mentioned, Professor McCosker, about being a younger person, that was really something that I'm trying to incorporate into my own narrative of how the things that I've experienced are still valid. Because a lot of the times when I'm speaking with professors or other students, I'm teaching them about things that they don't realize, but I've lived it, so I don't think of it as important. But that's sometimes reassuring that when you can kind of be more personable with someone, they are more willing to listen to what you have to say once you kind of make it a little bit more of a lived experience. So I really liked the movie for that aspect.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that. Winsome, would you please discuss your work in relation to the teaching of African American history and themes? You have talked a lot about that tonight. What else can you share with us in terms of your work? Is Winsome still here? Oh, I think, is she here?
In here.
Yeah, I was on mute, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
So I've written down 4 themes. So the power of storytelling and Chimamanda Achebe, and the notion of there isn't a single story, that we're more nuanced, we're more complex, and that we should also associate that nuanced storytelling with national parks. Going back to what Kai is saying, my partner is white. I've never gone. The first time I visited a park in the United States is with my white partner. I never felt comfortable going before. I never saw a lot of Black people going in, so I never went. I don't know. Again, that's the first time that I've gone, and that's the only time I've ever gone since then. 2 is the responsibilities that we have to tell our own stories, and this goes for Ada and Janice and Ken. And I'm talking about like people who are involved in, I'm not involved in environmental work, but talk about what you think about mountaintop, because it's that stuff I'm passionate about. And Ada and Janice with the history and everything else is, we want to make sure that comes to me, and then I give it to Kaya, and Kaya give it to those coming after her. Be honest as we tell our story. That's the other theme, and that's one of the things that, if anything, Bette was. She was honest, she was clear, she told it in a way that made it palatable. Because if we are to truly talk about it, our experiences as people of color in this country, it will not be palatable to white people. And we need to keep that in mind. She told it in a way that made it palatable, so people listened, are drawn to it. And now they can learn more. Which again, as I talked about earlier, is a skill that not everyone possesses. And the last one is we need to emphasize that our story is an American story and not just a Black story. That the first 20 slaves came to this country in 1619. We are just as much a part of this country as anyone else. And while Betty is a person of color who is telling her story, we need to also keep in mind that it's the American story. It's the story of who we are, the tapestry, the quilt. And that's how we should fundamentally think about her story and the way we pass that on, considering that in the next 20 to 25 years, our country will no longer be predominantly white. These stories are going to be crucial, the way we pass them on in sustaining our country and our democracy. That's it.
And we'd like to ask Ken, would you please discuss your work as a historical interpreter and instructor of interpretation? What is your goal in this capacity?
Well, I
And
think, yeah, it comes back to storytelling again and equipping storytellers, because that's the way we make connections as humans. And so as I listen to everybody speak, and I'm trying to think what my role is, and I thought, I'm kind of like tofu. I mean, not just like complexion wise, but as far as wherever I go, I sort of absorb the flavor of the place that I'm at and become passionate about that. So I really, I draw my energy from people like Janice and people who have a sense of place where they're rooted, and try to lend what I can in the effort to help tell those stories. And again, for folks who are environmentally active and they want to change things for the better for our planet, or, I think about, I've lived in Cleveland and Western Michigan and upstate New York, and now in Athens and Southeast Ohio, working with the little cities of Black Diamonds and these little, it's sort of like you get absorbed into places and going to, even, taking students up to Chester Hill to visit Ms. Adams and help just those stories. So I guess it's an insatiable curiosity that comes from wanting to hear other people's stories, whether it's my students or the places I'm at. And I think of, I kind of harken back to one of the questions you asked before is what's the real benefit in that? And one of them is very selfish. And Pete Seeger said it years ago. He said, even the causes that you jump into are maybe seemingly hopeless, or, you're up against incredible odds and you don't know if you can make it or not, but you band together. And at the very least, even if you don't ever succeed, you are now associated and you hang out and you spend your time with the best people, the best that humans have to offer, of people who care about other people and about their community, and not necessarily about how much they can put in their pocket and how much they can, how much stacks of money they have when they die. You surround yourself with the very best people. So from a very selfish point of view, I found myself, from my students to the people who have helped me and my students to the places I've lived, surrounded by the very best people. And that's what I think the joy of this film was, even watching not only Betty, but the other interpreters and the people those are my peeps, who have a passion about their place, who have a passion about the people they work with. And, when I used to have students say, if I go into this field, can I make a lot of money? And usually I say, no, you probably can't. You're not going to be driving a BMW to work, but you're probably going to be smiling on the way, because you want to be there. You want to be with those people. You want to be in that atmosphere. And to me, that kind of overarches the whole, the bigger story. And that's what, I think this film kind of made me happy for that reason, to still be associated with the people with the bright hearts, the open eyes, the live minds, and the people who really want to make a difference, for their community and for everybody, not just themselves. Oh.
Thank you. It's very lovely. So I'm going to finish up with this one last question. And Saskin says she's not afraid of offending who is in the audience, along with the quote, "The future is what I do or fail to do." And I know for me, I teach environmental studies and I'm very passionate about it. And I'm sensitive to not being too passionate about it with students. So I'd like to hear what other people think about. Somehow she had a knack. And I guess, again, it's in her storytelling.
Anyone?
You know, I just want to, no, I'm not going to say.
Go, no, and go ahead.
Just don't want to, I want to make sure actually that there was a comment, Lorraine, and I told Emily Feist.
Oh, please do the comment.
Okay. Has nothing to do with your question though.
Okay.
Where am I now? I'm sorry. Hold on a second. Where'd you go, Emily? Okay. I'd like to note, as a previous student of both Ken and Winsome, only having had them for one semester long course each, their words and passion for the topic and personal stories have stuck with me deeply. And I think of both of them quite often in the decisions I make, which I guess does relate to what we're talking about. Thank you, Emily.
Emily, would you like to say, do you want to say something else? That's quite
I just
a.
want to say,
No, that's it. I just wanted to acknowledge, I mean, it was back when we were talking about, impact of personal day-to-day, words and choices. And that's not a lot of time to spend with someone. But I really do. I mean, that's honest. And I just wanted to note that, yeah, just like the little things you might be doing on a daily basis in the class, like have a long-term impact. So yeah, thank you guys.
It's pretty
thank
great.
you. But if we want to, so I was wanting to know if anybody wanted to take the not offending people.
I think if a lot of people concerned themselves with offending people while telling their own story, we wouldn't get very far in history and a lot of things wouldn't have happened in the past. Because I think just my first thoughts are that if you're even having to be concerned about offending someone, then clearly something needs to be done. And clearly you need to be saying something important. And so I get a lot of courage from my own mom, who does a lot of racial work within the Episcopal Church. And she has a lot of experiences and probably a lot of people on this call as well with just not feeling comfortable in actually telling the truth. But what we've discussed as well is that sometimes we let our feelings and our anger get the best of us, which can kind of hinder some things, which is why I really enjoy how in the film Betty is just able to stay so composed the entire time in which she's teaching people, because what she is doing at the end of the day is teaching people about another narrative of history. And so I think that her history has nothing to do necessarily with the people in the room at that given point, except for what she's going to teach them. And so I really think that if she concerned herself with what they thought, then it wouldn't be as amazing of an exchange between her and them.
Yeah, I think there's a difference when you're an interpreter and the hat you wear, and again, literally or figuratively, when you're an interpreter, is to give people a positive connection to a place or a story. And same as a teacher, I think you're trying to open people's minds. You want engagement, and you want people to be, if they're offended, at least be free enough to say that in a classroom, to feel that it's a safe space. I probably have offended people, but I hope it's never been when I'm teaching or when I'm interpreting something. It may be just in personal conversation, and they can take it out on me, but not on a place and not on a content, not on a class, but say, this is, and again, hopefully not intentionally offended people, but even more cautious when you're when you're working and as a storyteller, as a teacher or interpreter.
Janice, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just thinking, if I'm talking and I'm telling this story, it's my story, and if you find it offensive, I don't think that's my problem. I mean, it's my story, it's how it's offensive to you says more about you than it does about me.
Right. Agreed. Miss Adams?
I agree with everything that's been said. And Janice, you're right on. Someone said earlier, be truthful. And when you're telling your story, you're telling from truth, from your point of view, how it affected you. And so I think Betty, with her soft-spoken voice, and she, with her almost 100 years of experiences, that weighs a lot in her behalf when she speaks. Her words become more powerful because of her many years of experiences and the way she tells the story. And we have to remember, we all have our own unique way of telling a story. And so never be afraid to tell your truth. And Miss Ivory, is so pleasant to meet you. I'm going to get out to Renville one of these days when it's safe, and we can share that Renville Cemetery experience a little bit more. But the thing of it is, the bottom line, I think, whether you're a teacher or a mother or a father, always speak from the heart, always speak the truth as you know it. And if corrections need to be made, you can make those corrections and say, this is the way it was when I was growing up, or this is the way it happened to me. So I think Betty's story, by the way, I did the conference earlier today, and I mentioned the film to some of the people who are connected with the National Trust. And so whoever decided to tell us about this film, you have made national news today. So they're going to be watching it. So thank you for allowing me to speak.
Great. Well, just because we want to respect the time of everyone, and we might be heading to bed soon. Any final comments?
I have thoroughly enjoyed every second of this panel, and I want you all to just like adopt me. Thank you. All your wisdom and your stories. Thank you. Oh, and Yang Miller put in the chat, don't forget, our next film is Rebuilding Paradise next Wednesday. Lorraine?
Yes, 7 o'clock is the panel. The actual film starts Monday and runs through Wednesday. And we're having a panelist. She'll be calling in from California. She lived in Paradise during the time of the fire, and now works in emergency for FEMA with regard to disasters.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's going to be we got a really nice National Geographic produced this film, and they wanted us to show it. So that's even nicer.
Yes.
Well, thanks for having me, and this was great. I enjoyed it. Ada, thanks for jumping in and calling you out.
Special guest star.
Yeah.
No, thank all of you. Thank you, Ken. I've admired Ken's work for so long. Thank you, everybody. Karen, thank you for bringing the film to us. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really
Thanks,
a pleasure
everyone.
to see everyone and meet you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
Ebony,
you.
thanks for the kind comment as well.
Thank you
And
all.
thank you to our
Thank you.
audience.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yang's gonna kick us off.
Christine, you didn't talk. That was so great, wasn't it? Oh, just beautiful.
I don't know why, but I take notes every time we do these things. So like I have pages of stuff people said.
Well, tonight
This
was,
is my first one. I really enjoyed it.
yes, we're so happy to have you. Thank you.
Gosh,
You-
I hope I was like, I'm about to send Lorraine an email saying, please don't not invite me to another one because I was talking too much.
Oh, no, I enjoyed it so much. You're a wonderful speaker.
Yeah, and I
Oh,
know-
all right. Thank you.
And I know Yang wants to go, but Winsome, I just want to tell you, we're doing the film Motherload, and I'm having the director, Liz Canning. She's going to be on on the panel. And I told her
Okay.
yeah, right. We're doing- well, she offered it, and she was really inexpensive. And but I said we deal with BIPOC issues here, and also we also and that we want to bring in social justice issues. And she like
Perfect.
a lot of things to say. What you were saying about access, and yeah, so she's going to address
Yeah.
all those things.
Nice. All right. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, cool.
Yep. I like this series. There's so much we could talk about, like on and
know.
on and on.
We-
But I'm
we-
also glad that Ada was able to connect with Janice because I think they're going to do some stuff on the Black Cemetery thing.
Oh,
That's
that'll
so
be good.
cool.
I
Yeah,
had asked Ada and she wasn't able to do it. And I
Mhm.
tried desperately reaching out to many resources. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so she goes up to Columbus for treatments, medical
Oh.
stuff, and so she's not always available. So I was actually really tickled when I saw her on. That's why I
Yeah.
called her out because
Yeah.
I know this is their area. So I think she probably made it back in time. So yeah, she doesn't commit a lot anymore just because she's going to Columbus for treatment, but she's still pretty active. And of course she is the pioneer of doing all this research on Black
Yeah.
in southeastern Ohio, Athens, Chester Hill, all of
Yeah.
that, that's all her. So
And Winsome, did you see that? Oh, Yang's okay. Well, real quick, did you see? We do have that book in.
I know. Oh,
archives.
Yang.
All right, I'm gonna bounce anyway. I got to pack. I'm leaving in the morning. I
It's
got
all right. Did I see what? Quickly.
what?
You say, Winsome, did you see?
We have a copy of that book in the archives at Ohio University Libraries.
Oh, perf. Yeah. I see
The
that in
multicultural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have one in our center, but that's good
That's good.
because again, I would love for people to check it out just to kind of
Yeah.
learn about, like Southeast Ohio Black history.
And
'Cause
actually,
people
we
feel
should.
like there isn't any. And we're
Yeah.
like, no, there's really it's really interesting.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
it's thrived since the 1800s. So,
I'm glad. Thank
yep.
you again. I'm gonna bounce everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Good
Thank
night.
you very
Thanks,
much again,
Yang.
Winsome.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much. I look forward to doing this again.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you,
All right.
Yang.
All right, bye.
Take care.
All right.
Bye.